Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mic'd Avengers podcast, where we focus on martial arts and action cinema, but definitely delve into much more. My name is Jason from Martial Arts Theater 3000. I've been a lifelong fan of martial arts movies from Bruce Lee to the Venom Mob, Bruceploitation, and everything in between.
My name's Dragon, aka the Fanatical Dragon on YouTube. I also write the Blu-ray reviews for Eastern Heroes magazine right here in the UK. I'm about 4 decades into this love affair with East Asian cinema, specifically action cinema. Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan and the Shaw brothers got me into Hong Kong films, but unlike my buddy Jason, I've seen a whole bunch of Japanese, Indonesian and South Korean action flicks too. So over the coming episodes, every so often, we're going to force feed him something he has not seen.
And I'm Shaun, also known as Food for Thought. It all started for me at the tender age of 14, where I discovered Jackie Chan's Drunken Master. From there, I kind of delved into old school Kung Fu, and that has been my passion for 30 plus years now. I also started delving into all realms of Asian cinema, and I'm very happy to say that these days I have a pretty strong passion for kind of dark Korean thrillers. If you like what you hear and you're enjoying the podcast, please give us a like, share, and subscribe. And please enjoy this episode of the Mic'd Avengers.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mic'd Avengers podcast. Today we are discussing Shaolin versus Lama. I'm so excited, and I'm super excited that I'm here again with my fellow Mic'd Avengers, Shaun from Food for Thought.
Hey.
And Dragon, the Fanatical Dragon.
Greetings.
I love how your real name is also Dragon when I did that. Like Dragon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Shaolin versus Lama, 1983. We got Lee Tso Nam. This one, for me, is like one of those ones when you're renting movies when you're young. I rented it going in blindly, blew my mind. It was so great. The strange thing is when I was young, I thought this was long. It always felt like a long movie to me. Mm-hmm. And it kind of did on the rewatch. But it's still an hour and a half. Like something, it shouldn't feel long, but it doesn't like go. Most hour and a halves just go so fast.
Yeah,
I think it feels like two movies because once he turns into the monk, it's like another whole run. But yeah, so I just want to say for me, this one is like the classic, the dub, the renting when you're young. It has that nostalgia dripping all over it, and I'll go into that more. But I wanted to ask you guys, what is your backstory on this? Like, where did you first see it? I'll start with Shaun first.
I came a little late to this one, actually. I did buy it during the VHS days, but it was kind of late stage VHS days for me. Early on, I was kind of just plucking films at random, and I didn't, whatever I picked up back then. I had no knowledge of what was going on in the Kung Fu world. So it just, like, if I happened to stumble across a Donnie Yen film, I happened to stumble across Donnie Yen film. But this one, I came to it late. I actually saw the VHS, and the VHS looked fantastic. It had Chen Sheng on the front, just busting a pose. And I was like, well, it's a Shaolin film. It's got to be good. And yeah, I remember distinctly falling in love with it and being kind of having it in my top, probably back then, top 3 for a long time. It was up there as one of the best. And then it also helped that, of course, back then I was listening to a lot of Wu-Tang, and it has all the classic Wu-Tang quotes in it if you watch the dubbed version. So yeah, that's really my history with it, and I've kind of taken it with me. I have changed my views on it over the years. My whether it's in my top 10 or 3 or 5 has kind of fluctuated. But yeah, it's a certified classic. There's no arguing that.
Well, let me throw in real quick though, we always talk the danger of the rewatch. Which way did you go? Did it drop it a little or?
Well, I'll tell you something. It's not that it dropped it. I actually saw more in the film this time around, especially to do with the fight choreography. I actually noticed something very specific, which I'll get into a little later on. But I didn't change my opinion. I do think it's fantastic. Would it have a place in my top 10 now? Probably not. But just because I've seen so many Kung Fu movies, and my list, it contains a lot of films that are just absolute classics to me. And Shaolin vs. Lama, while a classic, I just don't think it would make that top 10. But I do love it. I haven't really fluctuated that much on it.
Dragon.
For me, a pure shapes joy. This is definitely the shapiest movie that we've had a chance to speak about so far. And I think one that I heard before I saw, because I found the first Depth Charge album, J. Saul Kane's Depth Charge album was a huge deal when it came around. I think he'd put out like 2 or 3 12 inches, just sort of individual single releases. Then his album dropped, which was like, it was just heaven for me, which for anyone who doesn't know Depth Charge's music, it's mostly just like instrumental hip hop, but with a bunch of film samples over the top. So he has a track called Shaolin Buddha Finger, which heavily samples Shaolin versus Lama, which was one of the first records of his that I bought, absolutely loved and played to death. Then saw the movie, and so it had this extra resonance of now finally hearing where he basically lifted all the samples from, and I think that elevated it up to even more classic status for me back then. I think loved it back then, still love it now. For me, it's probably in my top tier of Lee Tso Nam movies. I think it's his slightly goofier maybe than the Hot, the Cool, the Vicious, which is the other one of his sort of kind of classic Shapes era movies that he made around the same sort of time. But I think this one's more fun. Hot, Cool, the Vicious is a little bit more plot driven and a bit more twisty with the plot and a bit less action. This is a great mix of packing a lot in. That's maybe why, Jason, you said it felt longer than it is. They get through quite a lot. Like it's got a pretty goofy start, and then kind of gets a little bit more serious as it kind of goes on. We even get a pretty great training sequence put in towards the end. Well, maybe more of a training montage put in towards the kind of the last act.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. VHS, I think, for me, was my way in, and it's one that I'm still desperately hoping we get a proper, decent restoration and Blu-ray release for. Particularly while Lee Tso Nam's still alive, right? It'd be great to kind of get him involved.
Imagine. One thing I do like about this film is that you mentioned like the goofiness, the silliness of it. I just don't think it pushes that too far. It's not egregious. You know how you watch like I think I bring him up all the time, but like Dean Sheck in a film, and it's just like, oh, this is too much. This film, while a bit goofy, it's okay. It's not too over the top.
It never descends into what I always think of as like gurning, where it's just straight up crazy, mad face pulling for the sake of comedy, right? Exactly. It never kind of steps into that territory, and I think there's really only kind of one character that's mostly responsible for the goofiness, and he's so fucking good. Like it's the drunk meat eating master that he meets his first master that he meets at the temple, but he's always on the right side of it. Never just gets pure goofy. He's always more kind of focused on incredible gymnastics. He's like some unbelievable gymnastics work.
Oh my gosh, I actually think the goofiness, it's a double-edged sword. The goofiness, I think 90% lies in the dub. And I think for me, the classicness of this lies in the dub too. Like, because I watched the version you sent me, Shaun, and it was a little tricky. It was in like an MKV file. I couldn't get it on my Fire Stick. I couldn't get it on my SD. So I just watched it on my tablet. I'll alter it later to get it on there. And it was weird. So I watched it twice. I watched the classic dub. And it,
as did I.
And man, the dub is so classic on this. And I often go back to that celestial moment for me. That's what it was all about, because I mean, I barely watched the subtitle ones. I'm sure we did in the VHS. They were all for me outside of like the Drunken Master 2s and the rarities. They were all English dubbed. So when I remember the moment when I got, what was it? 5 Shaolin Masters and Invincible Shaolin. When I got that on Celestial, it was not only my jaw dropped. I had to go to Sears and get one of those costs where you had to put the 4 numbers in. Did you guys have one? You had to make it make it region free using like a code.
Okay. Today, absolutely. Sorry.
Yeah, it was like hacking. I felt like it was in War Games, that movie or something. I had to put the 4. Now it's just so simple, but I put the 4 numbers in, and when I saw that Celestial, and then my first thought was, oh my gosh, this looks like a real movie, because my Invincible Shaolin was called Unbeatable Dragon, and that looked horrible. It was just like a 6th generation. It was really bad, my copy of it. So the jump, but then I went on that whole new path of the subtitles, where it's like the movie felt like a real movie. Even the training with the eggs was slightly less cheesy. It all like it and even though you learn later that it really wasn't Lo Mang's voice, all the Shaw brothers, because of the noise, they actually had a crew of guys that dub the voices,
Mhm.
which I remember being a little disappointed with. But at the time, at that 2004 or whatever, I still thought I'm like, wow, I'm hearing Chang Chang's voice,
Yeah.
All to say, the ones that I was so like stuck with that dub, like the Shaolin versus Lama, when I go to, it doesn't give me that effect. It kind of just takes it away a little bit. When I go to the subtitles, it loses a little bit of the charm. And this is going to see if you can follow me on this. The dub of it, the Wu-Tang, the New York and all that, like going and seeing in 42nd Street, all that's in that like dubbed American version. I mean, I say American just because that's like where I saw it, but it is British guys, doing it. That Western version, when you go to the widescreen with the subtitles, now it feels like it has to compete with the Shaw Brothers more. Do you know what I mean? Because Shaw Brothers, and then it's like, okay, it's kind of like, this is my thought I have. We talked about our 2 train tracks of Shaw Brothers and in general, Chang Che and Lau Kar-Long. I think the 2 train tracks of Indie are Joseph Kuo and Lee Tso Nam, at least for me, unless I'm missing another big pillar there.
I guess the only other one is Yu Wu Ping.
Well, of course, he's a heavy hitter. So what I'm saying, though, is when you fall in love with that RZA aspect, the Wu-Tang, when you go to the other one, it now has to compete with the like seriousness of like when you're seeing those Shaws in original language, and you see the full scope, and now it's a different animal, I actually think it's a phenomenon also when you add the dub, when you have the Wu-Tang, it becomes a different thing than just a Kung Fu Asian film to me. I don't even know what it is. It's kind of like it's a mixture of Eastern and Western cultures or something, when you have that dub.
Yeah.
And so all I'm saying is for me, the dub still reigns supreme. The magic of it all kind of lies in that. When I go to the subtitles, it just something, and also because I watched it second, it just, maybe if I watched the subtitles and I think the dub's just going to win out that version.
Well, it's funny you should say that. You are right now speaking so much on my wavelength that it's unbelievable. I had exactly the same experience.
Okay.
I watched the widescreen subtitled version first, and this is how my thought process went. So I'm on Letterboxd, so I rate films a lot. And originally, I went in and saw that I'd rated Shaolin versus Lama 5 out of 5. I watched it subtitled, and I lowered it to 3.5 out of 5.
Whoa! I thought you were gonna say 4.5.
I then watched it dubbed and took it back up to 4.5 out of 5. I believe genuinely the dub track for this film is the only way to go for me. I will never watch it subbed again. Granted, it's widescreen. It's beautiful to see it in that form. But honestly, I'll take the pan and scan full screen over the widescreen. And I don't know why. I think you're right. It taps into that nostalgia. It taps into that this is the only way we could see them back then kind of vibe. And I love when a Kung Fu film in particular does that. I love that it's got more than just a watching experience, when it's got like a feel to it, where it's got nostalgia and just, it's the beauty of the genre, because so many of us grew up watching those films, full screen, dubbed, choppy, the tracking's all off and it's just a mess. But we watched it that way and we loved it that way. And we've carried that on over the years. So nowadays, most of us, I set my wife down, for example, and if I sat her down in front of the pan and scan dubbed version of this, her head would explode. She'd hate it. And she just, because it's like, she'd be like, why is it in this quality? Why does it look so bad? And for me, I'm just like, no, that's part of the joy. Come on, absorb it, take it in. So I'm absolutely with you. The dub track is the only way to go for me on this one.
Where did you end up in the end? 4.5 or 4? Or
4.5, I believe.
Okay.
Either 4 or 4.5.
That's a good jump.
Remember. Yeah, I don't think it's quite a 5-star classic, just because there were certain things with the fight choreography in this one that I noticed. And it is a shapes film, but it's a shapes film that's slowly blurring into the early 80s kind of kickboxing style. Because if you notice in this film, it's got the pap 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 rhythmic exchanges, but they're short and then they all end with a big move. It's pap 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 bang.
Spinning back kick type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas a 1970s or late 70s shapes film is more pat, 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 pat. And, you know, Samo would do shapes takes that are like 30 moves long. And this one feels like it's more 7 moves long and then a big hit. And I think it just is slightly different to what I want from a shapes film. And don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's blurring the lines slightly in this film. And that just, I understood it, but it just took it down that little notch for me. And don't get me wrong, the fight choreography is beautiful. It was Peng Kang, right? Who choreographed this one?
Yes. But strangely, AI was trying to tell me it was Yun Wu Ping. When I was getting lazy, I didn't feel like I didn't feel like rewinding. So I just said, who, if you type it on Google right now, who fight choreographer on Shaolin vs. Lama, it says Yun Wu Ping and starts telling you about it. I was like, man,
down with AI. Down with AI.
But I just wanted to say on that, that's interesting because I think that actually, I was feeling it was such a sweet spot. I felt like it had that, because 82 with 5 Elements Ninjas and Lau Karlan, they were really upping it in the speed, and it's just like the oomph of it. It had that, it had an ode to the shapes, and like you said, of what was coming. But it goes back to that pan and scan, like you said, strangely, maybe because they're not like jumping all around the screen. When it went to the widescreen, it seemed a little slower to me. But when it felt, because I watched the Leg Fighters, I have the Pearl River. I wanted to go on there. I went in, and we can talk about that. I went into the extras. It has Frank Zhang and Michael. They go to visit Lee Tso Nam. I don't know if you guys got to check that extra.
I didn't. I need to.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And they're just talking to Lee Tso Nam, and we can go into that. But what I noticed on the Leg Fighters, it's 3 years earlier, but man, does that feel slower. And like it when you hear Leg Fighters, I was picturing like something, it just, you kind of have to adapt. I can let myself accept it's a little slower and be right in there. But this was like punchy. It didn't feel crazily undercranked. But
the undercranking is in this film, Shaolin vs. Lama, in my opinion, maybe the best undercranking I've ever seen. Because it's not over the top. It's not too much. It's just at that sweet spot that is perfect. It's fantastic.
So I guess your missing little element is not missing. It's just you love that shapes. You love the chain shapes. And you feel like it kind of,
the constant rhythmic like patterns of it all. It just cuts them a little short for me in this one. Yeah.
Where does it land for you, Dragon, when you're watching the fights?
Before we get into that, we should I'd be remiss for people who maybe not that familiar with the film. We haven't done our synopsis.
Oh, yes.
Real quick, because there's 2 that are one good, one laughable. So the pretty good one comes from IMDb. And it tells us that skilled fighter Sung Lu Ting is looking for a kung fu master who can beat him in battle and teach him new techniques. Shaolin monk Xiao Siyer introduces Sung Li to the Shaolin teachings, but Sung Li is not allowed to enter the school until the return of a Lama monk who stole a secret scroll containing every known fighting style from the monastery 12 years earlier, which is not bad. It's certainly markedly better than Google, which tells us martial artists launch a high-kicking duel in defense of the Shaolin temple.
Oh wow! Yeah,
which could be any movie from the
doesn't have a guy named Alexander.
By the way, there's no proof that this film came out in '83. Apparently, it had a Korean release date of '84.
Yeah, and apparently a significant cut. A significantly different cut.
Yes, so South Korea got a different cut this film, and also, but I think it hit Korea first, South Korea first. So I think it actually had a release date of '84, not '83. So.
And there's a different director attached to it, because we should say, I don't think we said so far, this is not a Hong Kong movie. I mean, up until this point, pretty much all of the martial arts movies that we've spoken about, with the exception of The Raid, have all been out of Hong Kong or with Drunken Master 2, kind of Hong Kong, mainland China collaboration. This is our first foray into Taiwanese cinema. Oh, wow. Much, much, much lower budget. So compared to the production length of time that they could shoot and the amount of resources that they had of Shaw Brothers, this is maybe a 10th on both those fronts. It's really hard getting information about this period of Taiwanese cinema. And I really tried to kind of see if I could kind of get some nuggets for us from the production of Shaolin versus Lama, but virtually impossible. I think
there, Dragon, right where you're saying the one point on that Lee Tso Nam extra was so it was Frank Zhang was interviewing him and then interpreting it for us and Michael and everyone picking it up. And it's when you press play on Leg Fighters, it actually starts with Dan Houston from Hollywood, and it's his print. He has one of the only Western. I don't know if you have that Blu-ray.
I do, yeah.
Okay, did you see how it starts with that? It goes down Dan Houston at the beginning.
Yeah,
and then it goes to Michael, and they're talking about how it's like one of the only prints in the Western Hemisphere. you know, and it was salvaged. Some guy got it in Toronto. But the interesting thing they said is Lee Tso Nam's like calling card, and why the studios loved him was he could take the lowest budget and make it appear to be higher budget. It could, and I felt that like there's little moments where I swear it was like a little like Star Wars model when he goes in to steal that Chi Sing manual. I swear that was like a little lantern on some dude's desk, but it looked like a tower. It was close enough, you know what I mean? But like, so I could see how they.
I think that's I think that might be a real location, because I think I think we've seen that tower in a few different movies. I think that one shows up in
Ninja
quite
Deadly
a bit.
Trap. I think that's because they filmed that in Taiwan. I
And
swear
some
that might be in.
Bruceploitation movies, I think.
Yes. But what I will say is this is my number one reason why Lee Tso Nam in these movies need restored is Lee Tso Nam, his other calling card is filming at night. He loves night scenes. There's Bruceploitation, Fist of Fury 2, half of it's at night. And the problem is when it's on that pan and scan, or even the kind of murkiness of the even though that 720 whatever it's called, reconstitution, or what's the word? The fan recomp, like, or whatever.
The fan made version, whatever.
It still has a little murkiness that a 2K or amazingly 4K would bring out, but the night scenes would suffer so much. When he was fighting that girl, the villain, when he was fighting her, I could barely see that scene. Like I could get the gist of them flying and stuff, you know.
That's a great scene too, where he's knocking her down, literally down level after level after level.
It's brutal. And I could feel the West American movies would maybe show some mercy, or a leg would come and stop it. But I was like, this is the period where there's so little political correctness and all this. Like, I don't even think they would like let llamas come off the way that guy is. They pick like a different, you know what I mean? Like nowadays they're like, oh, we can't have llamas be like this guy. We have to make up some fictional thing. Cause I was like, this guy is so evil. And he only cowers a little bit around his masters. Like he goes into that fake thing. He's like, well, I will agree for it. Like he goes for a minute, like he's going to be cool. And then it's just straight murder.
He's so good.
Totally.
So good.
And some really nice little touches, particularly when he ends up dispatching that girl, where we get like a cut back to him training, or him doing a move against like a wooden pole, which we didn't really see anywhere else in the movie, just to kind of show the fact that this is going to be a killing move, right? And he's like shattered the piece of wood, and then cuts back to him kicking the girl, and you know that he's basically like shattered her skull or shattered all the bones inside of her body. Yeah, the kind of really nice kind of little wee kind of flashes of him using kind of flashback as a way of just reinforcing. He does it again when you get a flashback to him, to our main character being told basically the importance of using the Shaolin Buddha finger accurately. And you kind of cut back to that point. You never really see that much of him training, just a couple of little scenes of him with a piece of paper hanging up, which I fucking love, where he's trying to perfect like punching the little perfect circle out of it, which is very cool.
Dragon, it didn't strike me as much as Human Lanterns and Sun Chung, but
longer sections maybe in Human Lanterns, big long extended sort of slow motion bits, where in here he would just use it sometimes at the end of a move.
Human Lanterns is like
thrown over.
Max Payne or something. Human Lanterns is like, no, what I was going to say is when there was something in the fighting I wanted to mention. You were just talking about. There's so much brutalness to it. He's almost a bit of a caricature of a villain in a way, but with his outfit and everything, but something really works on it. Something really works with him. I think he's a very powerful villain. It has enough substance of his history and everything. And he's really super intimidating when he shows up, you know?
Here's presence as well.
What I was going to say is Shaw Brothers, I don't think I've ever seen this. In Shaw Brothers, when you get hit and the guy's going down and his hit points are going like a video game, he spews blood. And this, some of them, they spew like saliva water.
It's so good. And they overuse it, but it's still great. It's so good.
I like it because it lets you know the
version of power powder, right? Instead of putting like powder on people's hands, he just gets them to fill their mouth full of water.
It's fantastic.
And that's like their halfway point. Like, you know, when you get hit with no like spit, you get the halfway point of the saliva. It's not quite the blood. And then when you see him breaking the trees, you know, she's done for, you know, like, because I was like rooting for her. I hadn't seen it in a while. I was like, oh, does she kind of get away? And I was like, man, those blows, like, you know, I think they really also do a thing where it's like in the Raid where there's so much back and forth in this they like to have power blows. Like when the guys hit each other's head, you don't know who's going to like make it out. And then they both don't make it out. You know, I like that.
Yeah, I think having Chen Shen in this, people don't give him credit enough. The villain in this, because he is one of the kind of unsung heroes of kung fu cinema. Always plays a villain typically. I mean, one of my favorite fight scenes of all time is in 7 Steps of Kung Fu, where he's the villain also, and he can move. Alexander Lowe can move very, very well, but Chen Shen he moves in just such a quick and precise way. He's really something to watch, and his outfits in this are crazy. It looks like a Power Ranger or something from Power Rangers half the time, but it's so good. That's like what we said, what we mentioned earlier, how Lee Tso Nam kind of stretches his budget out. The costumes in this are incredible. They look really, really great I mean, granted, it's a kung fu film, so you're not getting the Phantom Thread or anything, but it's still really, really impressive stuff. And I think Chen Shen doesn't get enough love. He is one of the quintessential kung fu villains for me.
Yeah, he should be up there with Wang Zhangli in terms of his screen presence on screen is tongue-tied. It's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah,
he's kind of, even when he's not actually doing moves, he kind of holds your attention as just in terms of as the character performance really, really well. He's got that right brand of like slightly laughing, mustache twirling villain thing to him, but backs it up with some pretty incredible moves.
He's not in a lot of movies, though, is he? His filmography.
He did quite a few.
He has a fair share.
Because he was, I think he's born. He's Chinese parents, but born in Korea.
Yeah.
So he's kind of Korean performer. But did most of his work in Taiwan.
If you notice, I noted this. I put it in my notes because I thought it was strange, but it may have just no, I don't know, relevance. During the credits, the opening credits of this film, traditional, typical kung fu film credits, just guys practicing all this stuff. Right. Chen Shen in this, in the credits, is using what looks like a Hapkido style. Like, he is tripping people and throwing people. In the film, he uses none of that. And in the credits, he's using it. And I was like, I wonder if they just made a conscious decision to go, actually, we're not going to have you be this Hapkido guy. We're going to have you be. But it just looks genuinely like they're trying to do something different with it. But then they just move away from it. Now, whether that's just how they decide to do it, and I'm just maybe nitpicking a little bit, but it's very interesting.
I think I was enamored. I was reading the credits more for some reason. I was like kind of just taking it all in. I need to rewatch that. Yeah, this, like Dragon said, this one with the indies and it not being restored, because it's restored, you get a lot of reviews from people, and of course you get the commentaries. I never, like that RZA, I'd asked both you guys, it was hard to get that RZA commentary. And it's not around. And then when I went on podcasts, surprisingly, I thought to be like 20, there's just like some old ones I couldn't. It was like one guy talking and it was hard to hear him, and it was just, I jumped to another one, and I just wanted to kind of get a consensus and overall. I mean, I know that, trust me, I know the consensus. Like, it's funny. One of the first times I ever talked to Shaun, I wrote you and I said, "Is Shaolin versus Lama the most mentioned kung fu movie of the past 10 years?" Because it kind of was like, when there's like a Five Deadly Venoms is brought up a ton, but along the way, I think of like 2015, 2016, right before the pandemic, when I got an Instagram in 2019, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone is mentioning Shaolin versus Lama. I didn't know it was this beloved. And it's such a classic. It really hits all the marks. I can't believe it's not restored. I can't believe that.
I think particularly in the US, and partly because of the RZA connection. I mean, we've kind of already mentioned the kind of the Wu-Tang sampling the movie pretty heavily. So it kind of, it was quite often put out as part of like a Wu-Tang collection. I think now you find it on YouTube on the Wu-Tang Collections channel, which I know is not remotely affiliated with the band, but I think for a lot of people it kind of goes hand in hand with that sort of New York kind of grindhousey style of
definitely.
From usually a lot of the times from people who would just call all these sort of movies karate flicks, because they would never differentiate between like the Japanese ones or the Taiwanese ones or the Hong Kong movies. It just all became that same sort of type of deal. And this one in particular, there's a lot that you can see breakdancers took a huge amount from. Particularly how almost everybody gets up from if they're on the ground. Like, you kind of see Alexander Lowe a lot of the time when he gets back up again, he's basically doing like a half windmill back into like a jumping up, right? And so I think this would have been on heavy rotation in kind of breakdance clubs and breakdance groups kind of picking up moves from it. This and Shaolin versus Wu-Tang as well are the two that are probably the most often mentioned, but the most overlooked because they're so hard for people to track down proper prints for or the rights for.
Yeah. When's the last time? Have you guys watched that Variety piece recently where RZA does his top 10 samples where he cites? It's a YouTube video. It's
I've seen it, but not recently. Yeah.
As I was digging to try to get some things that we could I wanted to get more information, and it had a Shaolin versus Lama section. And I love that. I've been going on a psychological thriller kick here. I've been watching some bad ones. I watched this Derailed, but it actually has RZA in it. If you've ever seen it, it's Jennifer Aniston, and RZA has a big part in it.
Years ago. I don't even remember much about it.
Yeah. RZA, he has a major part in it. It's pretty cool. It's interesting. But then I was thinking, man, RZA's going to be my way to get more info on Shaolin versus Lama. And when I went to watch that top 10 movies that influenced all his samples, it was cool. He's talking about how he set up the samples, how they had to put the VCR into the mixer, and it was they had to time it and everything. What I thought was interesting was, it's funny you mentioned breakdancing. I'm not sure if it was Shaolin versus Lama, but he goes, yeah, we got the move, and Kid and Play got the move where you grab your leg and you jump up through the leg. I don't know if he was talking about Shaolin versus Lama there, but he has the thing that I have a lot, especially on rewatches. It's so funny. If you watch, he goes, this is my favorite. Then goes the next one, and this is my favorite. Then he admits, he goes, well, this was my favorite for a while, but now this is my favorite. And it's because he said Shaolin versus Lama was everyone in the Wu-Tang Clan's favorite until they saw Shaolin versus Wu-Tang. And then but it made me think when you watch horror movies, you can have Exorcist sitting here, you can have Jaws, you can have all these major hitters, but you don't have the urge to say it's my favorite over the other ones. Or some of the Kung Fu movies, you just want to make these lists, you know what I mean? And I feel like I can love Halloween and love Friday the 13th, and they can sit on this parallel. But there's something about Kung Fu movies, maybe because it's fighting, you want to say, oh, it's my top 3. Now it's in my top 2. You know what I mean?
And with Kung Fu cinema fans, always their list will change week to week. It never stays consistent. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Never stays consistent. It's always, oh, well, Magnificent Butcher was my favorite last week, but I just rewatched Shaolin versus Lama, and it just fluctuates all the time.
You have my favorite quote. Every Kung Fu fan has 50 movies in their top 5.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's and this, I understand why this is in so many people's top 5. I do absolutely understand that. It is a certified classic, and I think for some odd reason, this seems to be one of the Kung Fu films that people that aren't necessarily deep into Kung Fu films have seen for some reason. And it's such a weird film for people to have seen. But I guess, all because of that Wu-Tang connection, that New York kind of exploitation grindhouse connection. And it like you said, Dragon, as well, I think you're right. It was released in some of those Wu-Tang collections back in the day. Which people picked up, and watched. So I don't know. It's interesting, but finding tidbits on this film is so difficult.
Oh, I know.
The most interesting thing I saw is the old master, the Shaolin master that eats meat and drinks. If you look at his filmography, he was an extra in everything, right? And he's very rarely had a big role. But in this film, it seems to be his big breakout role. And the rest, if you go down HKMB, it's just extra in a bunch of films. And also, I found out he choreographed Mystery of Chess Boxing.
Whoa.
He was one of the choreographers, I should say, on Mystery of Chess Boxing. Which I was just like, oh my God, I've never even heard of this guy. And yet he choreographed one of the ultimate classics.
I think a huge amount of people working on this, including the director, kind of most of the choreographer, the cinematographer, they all did another movie for Lee Tso Nam called Challenge of the Lady Ninja, which is another one that we'll get to at some point because it's a belter. But that's getting a release from Error 4444. And hopefully they'll kind of do some work to kind of get some extras for it. And because so many of the same people are involved, it's not going to be maybe speaking directly about this film, but hopefully we'll get a chance to get a little bit more insight into that kind of era or that time in Taiwan, because we're very familiar with Taiwan's most famous kind of martial arts exports, the Venom Mob. Pretty much almost all of them from Taiwan originally, and Chang Chase shot so many movies there, and we had the joy to visit there for the first time at Christmas time, and Taiwan's an amazingly weird place, not what I expected at all.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel like China at all. It feels a lot more like this, like it's entirely its own thing, and it's got so much of a Japanese influence. You see it so much in the architecture and in the food and in the culture there, because Japan had invaded and had taken control over Taiwan at a certain point. So it's like this strange kind of mix of different kind of Asian cultures all mashed together. And their movies are kind of a little bit representative of that. Like we get an awful lot of the stuff that we love from Hong Kong cinema, but there's also kind of some of the stuff that you think of more for the 60s and the 70s Japanese cinema at the time, less so in the choreography, but a little bit more in the kind of the filmmaking aspects of it. The gymnastics work's always second to none. Maybe even characters that you don't necessarily expect, like the little friend monk at one point does a whole big massive like series of backflips just when he's kind of showing off when he first kind of reveals
he goes on that wall right that moment.
Yeah.
And that broke the flow of it. That was like a kind of, that sets the tone. It's like, wow, there's something special going on here, you know? You know.
But he's not really a character who ever gets to fight in the film. He's sort of there as being the sort of friend and the facilitator. He'll get him medicine or he'll get him food and ultimately gets him into the temple. But that dude, has basically got a lot more. There's a lot more going on with that kid than we saw in this movie, right? He's pretty incredible.
But he shapes up quick. He's kind of like he seems like he's gonna be a thief, like always grabbing stuff. But he doesn't really he kind of shapes up and then he becomes way more charming and like you could tell he has a good character to him. But I wanted to ask you, Dragon. Now this is probably from all the movies, like Five Shaolin Masters. They've said like that's one of the, I think, if not the last one that Lau Kar-leung choreographed with Chang Che, one of them, and they've said he kind of like shadow directed that one. We took all the teams over to Taiwan to do that. That's my vision of Taiwan. When you say Taiwan, I just picture amazing wilderness, like in my mind. But I guess it's where you go. But as you guys know, you start to learn like, oh, this one's a Dragon Lee. You the Korean background you can see for that time period. I can now spot the Taiwan, a lot more wilderness. They use a lot more because I think in Hong Kong with Kowloon there, they go to those rock quarries a lot, especially in the modern ones, and they use the water a lot. And of course, like in Avenging Eagle, they go to the woods and stuff. But it's something about Taiwan, I get a lot of wilderness vibe, and they use a lot of that.
Bit. Well, Taiwan, quite similar to Japan, is a relatively small island. I mean, and Taiwan's an awful lot, huge amount smaller than Japan is. But most of the center of the island is all mountains. Kind of fairly large kind of hills, mountains that you can't really easily build large cities in. So all the cities are dotted around the outside of the island, very close to the coast. So almost all of them have beaches. But as soon as you move even just a tiny bit inland, you're moving into this beautifully lush kind of green, kind of rocky mountain escapes. Looks almost like little bits of New Zealand. If you think of some of the scenery from Lord of the Rings, the center of Taiwan looks quite a lot like that, but infinitely more green because they get so much kind of there's so many monsoons and there's so much kind of like heavy rain there that everything's so lush and green. So you kind of always, in my mind, coming from Scotland, I think of mountains as being pretty barren affairs with almost no trees or anything growing up the side of them because the wind's so strong. There it's like almost the exact opposite, where it's so dense, it's borderline tropical rainforest jungle style, where it's kind of like loads of bamboo trees and things. So you don't really need to head that far out of the main cities before you get into this most unbelievable scenery. It's absolutely beautiful. If anybody gets a chance to go to Taiwan, go there and spend twice as long there as you think you're going to need, because there's a lot to pack in. And we made it from one side of the island right the way down to the bottom. It's not that big. You can travel from one end to the other because the high-speed train network's so good. You can.
Is it like the size of Ireland or not that big?
A bit bigger than that. A little bit bigger than that. It took about 4.5 hours by high-speed train, I think, to get from one end to the other. But we stopped. We broke up the journey, like stayed in one city and then kind of went further south down until we kind of got to the very, very bottom.
My geography was failing me a bit because when I would read about the Venoms and how they went to Taiwan and all the back and forth with Ninja and the Deadly Trap, they would talk about how Pao Su Lee, Chang Che's system. The way they talked about Taiwan, I pictured it like Ireland to Wales. You know what I mean? I pictured it like a little like hop, skip, and a jump over the Irish Sea. But when I asked Dragon, I was like, "Oh, are you guys like going back and forth to Hong Kong?" I asked it like, and then you go, "Oh no, mate, that's like this far away." I looked, I was like, "Oh man, this like I don't know. It's like a 6-hour flight or something, maybe.
I
Maybe
don't
not
think it's
that.
quite as long as that.
Okay.
You can fly fairly easily. It's more at this particular time. It's more logistically difficult because of kind of the visa situation, where mainland China and Taiwan not in the best place with each other at the moment, right? Where Taiwan wants to remain an independent country, and China's desperate to take it back under the fold, and America's basically kind of helping Taiwan to stay independent for the time being. So America's got a pretty strong military presence, which is continuously being tested by both sides. So that there's things are pretty fraught. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that unfolds now that Trump's in office. I don't know, because I can see him completely doubling down to try and do everything he possibly can do to help Taiwan remain an independent country. Which I don't know if that was been true for the last kind of administration. So I think China was making more and more inroads over the last few years. But anyway, I don't want to get too political. That's not what we're about. But just being that it can logistically be very difficult for people from mainland China to go to Taiwan.
Is Alexander Luo Taiwanese?
Yes.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Pretty much almost everybody involved in the cast is, with the exception of Chan Sang, who's I think probably spent most of his time living and working in Taiwan, because almost all the movies he made are all Taiwanese movies.
Yeah.
But I think he was just born in Incheon, but his parents Chinese, so he probably would have been raised natively speaking Mandarin more than he would have been speaking Korean.
Okay.
He was interviewed. I think I did try and dig out the stuff from Eastern Heroes, but I couldn't put it to hand, because there's definitely been a couple of times when they brought him over.
Yeah.
And he was able to kind of go and do like kind of meet and greets down at the Kung Fu Cafe down south. And so I think he's very much, particularly if you speak to Rodney about him, Rodney is, I'm sure, got many a story that he can tell us. I'm sure Rodney's probably met him a bunch of times, and the times when he's come across. But yeah, an incredible performer. But I think Lee Tso Nam, all of his movies really were amongst that kind of little golden era of Taiwanese, always low budget,
Definitely.
but always kind of bigger than the sum of their parts, right? They kind of really managed to do an awful lot with a little.
Yeah, this film, I feel like watching it, I don't know whether who was influenced by who, but this film feels like, if you put it this way, if someone would have told me this film's directed by Robert Tai, I would have been like, yeah, sure, okay. It feels a little Robert Tai-ish, but yeah, obviously it's Lee Tso Nam, and that's...
You're right, because Lee Tso Nam, if you look at Hot, Cold, and the Vicious, especially Fist of Fury 2, like when I was young and watched Fist of Fury 2, when I first saw it, it takes like half the movie till you have like your first fight. But what happens, of course, as you're older, you appreciate the enrichment of it. You get so invested in a lot of the same characters from Fist of Fury are in it.
Yeah.
And Lee Tso Nam, he really doesn't rush things. Usually, that's what I'm saying. How you feel a different director feel. This feels like, I think the answer to why so many people get enamored with it is if you have someone resistant. And Shaun, with your podcast, often you want to kind of like win over your co-hosts. If I had to sit someone down to watch Kung Fu movies and they actually were saying, I'm not sure if I even like Kung Fu movies, I would get Shaolin versus Lama on deck. There's such little dialogue. We want the dialogue to make you understand later that the fights, they're anchored by the plot and everything. Of course, this has just enough to have the power to them, but it doesn't, an audience isn't going to be dozing off in this one. This is like, I think there's maybe 3 minutes between each fight scene, if that, but that's not Lee Tso Nam's thing. What other movies come to mind with him? Like I said, the build up in Hot, the Cold, the Vicious, Exit the Dragon, Enter the Tiger. That's a different animal. I mean, Lee Tso Nam, he has a lot of nice Bruceploitation ones with, Edge of Fury, but he's more about character building, a lot of night scenes. He doesn't feel rushed to get to everything, but this one feels like a different animal. This feels like kind of, in the way I feel like Five Elements Ninja felt out of character for Chang Che in a way. The structure of it was a little different. This feels like, I don't know, Lee Tso Nam was like, let's go full 1984. Let's go into this type of zone.
To me, it feels like him kind of responding to the Yuen Wu Ping of it all, where I think this is almost like his most, like if Fu, you said you wouldn't be surprised if you found out, or someone had said that Robert Tai directed it. I would kind of feel the same a little bit if someone had said, oh yeah, that's like that time that Yuen Wu Ping went over to Taiwan and made a movie, because it's very Wu Ping kind of clan centric in the way that it kind of unfolds and does its beats, where it's almost like a Taiwanese response to Snake and Eagle Shadow and Drunken Master. It feels a lot more like that, but through a more shapy lens. And so I think it's, if that makes any sense, because there's still quite a lot of like shapes in Drunken Master and in Snake and Eagle's Shadow, but not quite to the same sort of degree here, where it's almost like every character will do the shapes before they actually even get into the fight.
Yes.
Most of the shapes are done not as a part of the choreography. It's done as a sort of precursor to the move.
Chef's
like an animal.
Mwah. I love that.
Well, it's like a cobra showing. Well, and that's what RZA said on his. There's a couple of things I want to ask you guys about that too. But before I get to that, RZA said that moment. This is on that Variety piece where he's talking about the samples. He said in the theaters, he said that when the villain does that now shadow boxing, what they use as a sample, when he did that in the theater, he said the entire place just went screaming and went crazy.
Yeah.
And RZA, he seems like he's emotional there. He gets like moved by it. And I know what he meant, because I never, until I went to Tarantino's theater in LA when for that Shawtember, I never really had that experience. I went to movies all the time, but there's a very different animal, the Grindhouse, where they laugh at the funny parts, where they, and there's instructions, like they come and they say, guys, no cameras out. And they say no talking, but they kind of like say, but if you see something funny, I don't think they actually said that part, but that's given that they're going to react to everything. Yeah. And that's what moved Kid with the Golden Arm for me, because I always felt I didn't quite get why that was so high up in the Venoms for everyone, because I had rate a lot of ones higher. When I saw that in the theater, I could see the reaction, like the moment where Lo Mang breaks the sword into a million pieces. Yeah. I felt like the place was going to do a standing ovation. It gets you into it. It's like, oh my God, these people are feeling every nuance of this, Okay. And that's like the third element. So there's the Kung Fu movie filmed in Taiwan with the original language and that aspect. Then there's like the British dubbers, which are so British to me in this one. They say lads more than any other Kung Fu movie I've seen in this one. I was like, I know Ted and those dubbers, I don't know, the main guys that do Master Killer and the majority and the Godzilla ones, they don't sound too British to me, their accent. This one was a little more, but thrown in the lads so much, I was like, man, they're really like going for it. And what I was saying though is that's like the other element. So you can see the grindhouse nature of it, the hip hop, but then there's also the audience reaction. I think it's like a trifecta of that, of how they see it. And so that's what RZA pointed out. The other thing I wanted to ask you is the first thing he says about it is he goes, oh, and this is actually part of a trilogy. So there's Shaolin Temple versus Lama. What is that? Is that even really related?
Shaolin Temple against Lama, I think, is the original title of that one. And no, it's not related. Okay. Completely different director, completely different fight choreographers and actors, I believe.
So when he dropped that line, oh, this is part of a trilogy, he said it like real matter of fact. I said, okay, I'm assuming Shaolin Temple versus Lama's
unless he's meaning it part of it was always shown alongside a couple of other movies, so they kind of because I didn't ever think it had any kind of relatable other films attached to it.
I think it's kind of like similar to how they say Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja. They call that the Ninja trilogy. But I don't think it's kind of loose, you know what I mean? It does have Shogasugi, but it's not like I felt like there was maybe sister films that kind of fell in, but who knows?
The only other film that feels slightly like this is Shaolin Temple Strikes Back as well, which has Chen Shen in it. And it feels kind of like this one, but I wouldn't say trilogy. I mean, I get it, sister films, it makes perfect sense, but yeah, trilogy, I think RZA's pulling our leg there. I don't think he's... Some
other observations is I felt of course you get a lot of 36 chamber, especially the resistance with the masters and everything. And I also I can't believe this. If we were going to do like a Mic'd Avengers award show, this has to be the one that has Buddha's name be praised the most. I mean, there's one scene, I swear he drops like 15 he can't even answer the guy without saying Buddha's name be praised. Like every question he's like, but sir, he has a good heart. He wants to Buddha's name be praised. And then then he talks, I'm like, man, and then they're dropping those wow. I mean, we should have done a running tally. Like if you had to take a shot, you'd need like a liver transplant.
Classic stuff.
I know. There's so much in there too, that just the classicness of it all. I mean,
ending, the last scene.
Oh man,
is remarkably good in this film.
Yes.
It's so good. Just Chen going absolutely bonkers.
Oh man. And him showing mercy, and you don't want him to. I mean, this guy is so evil. I mean, and it all came together, the hero's journey of it. Like, so this story, of course, is the Darth Vader, the fallen angel. And when he says, I am the devil, this is the Lucifer story of fallen from,
Right.
it's that hero's journey. But I never saw it where he's like in on it, like, wait, I am the devil, I must, and he's bashing his head.
So good. It's so good.
I must be killed so that Buddha can be shown to exist.
Yeah.
I know, but that's the undercurrent in him. And you see slip a little bit, like he's teetering, where he kind of actually shows a little bit of nobleness and a little bit of that. There's like that aspect I've talked about in wuxia where there's like some rules and stuff. He's like, oh, I mean, it's not so much you've dropped your sword, I can't kill you, but there's some sort of like understood rules I see in those movies. In this, he kind of falls into that. But then when they call him out on it, they're like, but you made this pledge. He's like, no, I was faking it the whole time. Oh, and another thing I wanted to ask is, Dragon, you mentioned Shaolin Buddha finger. So, and sadly, I think you mentioned it from the guy that passed away last year, right? There's also, Shaun would know this, a Wu-Tang album or song, Shaolin Buddha finger, from 95, I think. Something like that.
There may be.
Yeah. Yeah, not to keep going back to that. When you need to get some info.
The main Wu-Tang clip, I was the shadowboxing one that I always thought kind of came from this one.
That one, and was that the Wu-Tang style you used against me? Forgive me. I've learned so many styles. Absolute classic.
Well, this wasn't so much a sample. This was like, you know how the offshoot Wu-Tang albums will have Liquid Swords and not to keep going back to that. If anyone's listening, go to YouTube and type in RZA top 10 samples. It was so fun to watch that this morning. Yeah. It's so cool. But he also not only went into the samples, he would say, so Master of the Flying Guillotine, we felt like our lyrics had to take your head off in 3 seconds. So I gave that to this guy. And then Ghostface Killer was so intimidating. So he assigned all the roles. But then it said there's some 1995, it's one of the ones from 1995. I think the song was called Shaolin Buddha Finger or something like that. It was, my Wu-Tang, I actually didn't do the solo albums as much. I, of course, love Enter the Wu-Tang. But I remember in 97, I was trying that double album, the second one to follow up. I had the Killer Bees video.
Wu-Tang Forever.
Yeah, and it lost me a little bit. It was a little watered down, maybe, that album. But
some of it's awesome. It's like
it should have been a solo disc. Should have been one disc. If they condensed it all into a perfect solo disc, it would have worked amazingly. But
I wrote Fu, and Fu told me a lot of he ranked me all of them, which ones I need to get first, the solo albums and everything, because I tend to just knew the main Wu-Tangs. But man, like in our jiu-jitsu class, at 10th Planet, they love playing like Wu-Tang Ain't Nothing and all those songs like during class and stuff. And it's just cool how the martial arts mixing with hip hop, and it's kind of course, Wu-Tang. I just love it all. It's just so great. It's there's a book called China Forever, and it touches that on a lot of that. I don't know if you guys ever seen that book called China Forever. It really touches on hip hop and that aspect of it. And it's interesting. I love the melting. I wish we'd have, I don't know, Fu, you're more into modern hip hop. Do they ever reference any of this? Are they saying Kid with the Golden Arm in any modern?
I mean, there's definitely a kung fu through thread in hip hop, that there are some artists that just are big on hip hop, and maybe less of the whole sampling and more of the like mentioning of kung fu or kung fu cinema. There's a group called the Arsonists. I can't remember what year their album came out, but there's a song on there, and I wish I can remember what the title was. But a guy called Q Unique, who was in the Arsonists, he does a solo song where he raps like all about martial arts and like kung fu, and it's a really good song. And I think there's certain things that pop up like that. There's a guy called Awkwards, and he did a whole album where every single song on it sampled not the quotes, but the actual music from a Jackie Chan film. And it may have just been Police Story, if I remember correctly. But he made an entire album, and it just sampled maybe Police Story across the board. So there's a lot of influence in there, but Wu-Tang kicked it off. And of course, the Wu-Tang
universe.
Death Charge kicked it off. Yes. But do you think Wu-Tang was influenced by that?
I don't think
you think it was separate, right?
I suspect so, unless I find it really hard to believe. I mean, RZA's certainly got his finger to the pulse, but I think a lot of it was just a great minds think alike. I think because the Death Charge album that I'm speaking about is this one, which is 9 Deadly Realms, and you can kind of see
with Tao Tan Ling on the front.
Yeah, from the Hot, the Cool, Vicious.
Great
And
cover.
I think no rapping on any of these. There's literally, it's all really instrumental. So anytime that there is any kind of voices, it's all lifted from films. And he didn't just kind of stick to kung fu movies, so that was certainly the bulk of it.
Yeah.
He would pull a lot from westerns as well, spaghetti westerns, and occasionally from kind of football matches and stuff too. But even just his track listings, I mean, the album kicks off with Shaolin Buddha Finger. Track 2 is Dead by Dawn, which is just loaded with samples from The Evil Dead. And you got Bounty Killers, Step Charge, Bastard Swordsman, Bounty Killers 2, Daughters of Darkness, Goal, and Hubba Hubba Hubba. The whole album's absolutely.
Could I listen to that on Spotify afterwards? If you went there?
It'll be on Spotify, and I think almost all of it's on YouTube as well. And I know you've got YouTube Music; you'll find it pretty much all of it on there. And fall down a rabbit hole with his stuff, because it's he would sometimes lift melodies and things as well from the soundtracks. So you'll hear there's a very distinctive sound that you hear when in Invincible Shaolin, anytime that Chang Shang jumps, there's this little kind of wee string kind of little thing that it does. It's kind of like this sort of fluttery thing. He uses that as like the kind of basis for one of the songs. It'll kind of leads a lot of the tracks in. So he takes a lot from it. And these certain things become like cemented in your brain even more. So when you see them in place in the film, it just raises stuff to an extra level.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it really does. Just coming across one of those classic samples is just wonderful in whatever film, whether it's Shaolin and Wu-Tang, this or whatever. Just hearing that song, hearing that quote from a classic song that maybe you grew up with, it's just like, oh my god, yeah, this is where it came from. And sometimes it's good when you get surprised. It's good when you're watching a kung fu film, you're like, oh my god, it's this sample from that song. That's always fun.
Complete.
I told you I've been watching these thrillers, and this is like a roundabout. This will bring us back to Shaolin versus Lama. But I wanted to say, so I was just going on a kick where it was strange. I watched this movie called Joyride. I liked when I was younger. Have you seen that horror movie? I think it's so good. It's like a horror movie with Paul Walker. Is that his name from
in the UK? In the UK, it was actually called Roadkill, if I remember.
Okay.
Yeah. So I popped that on. We had a thing in the States. It was Comcast cable where you could just like way before like any Pluto and all that stuff. You could just pick a movie. Some were free. I go to a free section. I just grabbed that like 2001 or whenever it came out. And I was like, man, it was so solid. I was really surprised. Right. Yeah, so good. So I went on a kick, and then I watched Fatal Attraction, and then I go to YouTube and type in top 10 thrillers, and you go down that path. And then I watched The Gift, which anyone listening and you guys check that movie. Have you seen that?
I've seen it.
Yeah, I thought that was really solid. I thought that was really good. So I'm watching this, but when I'm watching all these ones, that's 2015, but all these ones in 2004 and 3, you see the lack of cell phones, like, and there's like a thing in it helps horror movies a lot, because now they have to go to some cabin with no reception, because it's just so many. You could just say pull out your cell phone, film the guy or whatever. There's a part in Joyride where this girl's laying on a bed and they're just in some motel, and she goes, they're leaving from college, and she goes, I just feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere. No one can get a hold of me. I'm just floating. I'm like, wow, no one has had that feeling in a really long time.
Right.
This is like, and what made me in Shaolin versus Lama think that is, if there's any downtime and they go down a pathway, these guys are just laying on logs in the woods. And maybe because I've just been trying to get away from my cell phone, I'm like, oh man. So now I'm not even pining for Joyride. I'm like, imagine the days where you just lay on a log up in a tree all day. Because I'm thinking, maybe I'm reading into like, what does this dude do all day? I know he loves wine. I know he said he loves fighting. God, does he love chicken? But he's like up in this tree. And then I noticed the Alexander's character was doing the same thing, because they had to have him run into the girl when she's escaping, Yeah. But he's just up on this rock, just like, I don't know. I think we need to start trying to do that. Like, just,
It's a simple life.
Oh, man.
Touch grass.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
So what sticks out to you guys? For me, I think the opening half of this movie is amazing. I don't know why when he shaves his head, the training lags for me a little bit. Maybe because there's some, I know it's odd, because the training has such good philosophy in it. I mean, because he goes to that like library and he kind of says, I can't remember. He says like, we plan to bring you here and you're going to learn.
Kind of, there's almost like two stages to the training. There's his original training with our chicken loving kind of drunk monk, and then after his demise, he sort of switches to a different teacher. And the new teacher is the one that teaches him Shaolin Buddha Finger. And so the sort of second part, well, I guess arguably both parts are kind of more montages than they are extended sequences. And he progresses pretty quick. I really love the resistance band thing where he's like strapped with rubber bands. He's just trying to move forward, which I don't really know what it's trying to train him to do other than, I guess, get him stronger. But you kind of see his progression with being able to kind of do that. And there's sort of shades of that's maybe some of the bits that feel the most Wu Pingy because he's doing the Jackie Chan style. So he's not lifting up little cups of water. He's kind of suspended over a barrel, and at a certain point, he just gets.
I've seen that like 5 times. I mean, it's the Fearless Hyena kickboxing, upside down sit-ups, and Fearless Hyena has where the guy's standing on those 2 whatever bags of sand, and he's trying to push those ropes. It's very similar to that, I guess. What do you like?
Training sequences are so good because if you really analyze them, you're like, well, this makes no sense. Why is he doing this? But it's so good.
Well, my idea is it's the baseball bat. Oh, I was just saying it's the baseball bat with the weight on it, and you swing a ton with it. So when you get out to hit the baseball, they take the weight off, so it's easier. So I thought he had like 1,000 bands on him. I think it's just to make an audience go, "Wow!" I mean, that dude was like,
exactly. It's so good.
It looks good. It looks cool. The one that's even weirder is the very strange gold, massive, huge forearm covering and leg covering things that he's got, and he's just trying to hop his way upstairs.
He can only move like the guy from Christmas Story, the bully, like his arms.
It looks ridiculous, but it's very cool, and you see the progression super quick because within like less than a minute or 2 minutes, he's gone from struggling to try and get up one step to just bouncing his way up really quickly. All the time being watched by his kind of skeptical, very drunk teacher. But I think the second part of the training is the cooler one for me, when he's learning the Shaolin Buddha Finger with the bits of paper and the little wooden planks is really cool.
Well, it's great. I guess I'm going to ask you guys too your favorite parts of this movie. But I don't know why the first half grabs me. I do really like that Buddha Finger, and there's a lot of philosophy in that whole section. The ending is amazing. There's something I've been noticing on these movies. I've often heard that with the Grindhouse, they wanted to do 90 minutes was usually the Grindhouse like double header. And I know that's why a lot of those exploitation movies try to hit that hour 30. You see that a ton, always hour 34. But you can see in the movie, it feels like they have to rush things sometimes at the end. Sometimes I'll just hit the time and be like, oh, there's only 6 minutes left for this final fight. And you'd think the final fight between the two of them, even though they actually fought like 3 times in the movie, Alexander. And sometimes the pacing, it feels like they kind of cram a lot. It's kind of like you said, montage. It turns into like Rocky IV montages. Then let's get to the fight. But that end fight, it has so many neat, like when the two of them show up, why do you notice how they just fall down that hill? It's funny. They just roll down the hill. They want to get there so fast. It's like, has a lot of neat things to it. And they said Lee Tso Nam's very deliberate. He said in that interview, he doesn't do any improvisation. He plans out like he doesn't have like Tarantino's very by the screenplay, but some directors, if you say a line or if the director respects you enough, they'll let you kind of ad lib and they'll use that. It sounded like Lee Tso Nam really had his vision. It wasn't kind of like a ragtag thing, But I wanted to ask you, like, what sticks out for you, Shaun? What's your favorite parts in it?
I think I can't even really say like what's an overall thing that sticks out. I think it's just the overall I've said this word way too much in this episode, vibe of the film. It's a perfect like
microcosm.
Exactly, microcosm, perfect of just kung fu cinema joy. And I think it just has. I mean, even like the little moments, even the fact that his weak spot is in his armpit. It's like, of course, perfect, fantastic. Where else? Everyone's like, it's going to be in his balls. It's going to be in his balls.
I know.
Like, gotcha, it's in his armpit. And I love that. I love just when they switch things up. Again, I love the costumes in this. I don't know. It's just, I'd be interested to see the Korean version because apparently it doesn't add any fight scenes. It's all plot. And to see it fleshed out, because you were saying earlier, Jason, that it's like 3 minutes between fights. It'd be interesting to see a version where the plot is kind of stretched out a little bit, and maybe it has some more substance to it. I would love to see that, but apparently that version is impossible to find.
So where'd you hear about that version? Just on the forums and stuff?
Back in the day, I saw it on the Kung Fu Fandom forum years ago. It was talked about, honestly, about 10 years ago. And someone was talking about that they had a copy, but I don't know if they ever shared it. And as far as I know, it's like never made its way to YouTube. I haven't even seen any scenes from it, let alone
but it's
the full
like
film.
a 2-hour version, maybe a half
I don't
hour
know.
more.
I'd be genuinely interested to see what the runtime is, because I honestly don't know. Apparently, I mean, for example, the scene where all the bad guys are around the table and
I knew you were gonna bring that up.
Yeah,
and he stabs them. It seems like there should be more there.
Exactly. That is, you find out who they are, where they come from, and it fleshes out that part a little bit more. So I don't know. I'd just be genuinely interested to see like a different version of this. But as it is, it's just such a gold nugget of like joy. I keep coming back to the word joy. That's just, as a Kung Fu cinema fan, I think I can rewatch this and kind of just get that nostalgia feel and kind of that beauty that I feel from Kung Fu films. And I also think that newcomers can enjoy that as well. Like you say, you would sit someone down who is not necessarily into the genre and watch this. I agree. I think there's something, even people who haven't even heard the Wu-Tang songs, I think, allow me to demonstrate this. I think there's just a perfect moment. I think even people that don't know the songs would really, really enjoy that. It's just good stuff. Good stuff.
Dragon, what sticks out for you?
Same for me. I think it's hard kind of like picking out kind of individual scenes as kind of being elevated amongst the whole overall feel of the film. It kind of feels a little bit like a relic out of its time, though. I think if I'd found out that, oh no, wait a minute, we made a typo, this was not actually made in 1983, really it was 1977, I'd be like, yep, because it totally feels like that sort of like perfect era, late 70s.
Yeah.
Kind of open hand.
What's the last old school film you think that was made? Invincible Pole Fighter or 8 Gram Pole Fighter is what, 1985? What is there?
I think it's 84.
84?
Yeah.
And then what? Martial Arts from Shaolin is 86?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of got an old school vibe, even though it's bringing that wushu choreography in.
A little bit, but I always think that feels so different because it's in the mainland. But yeah,
I'd love to know what the last old school 70s feel film is.
I guess they tried. I mean, they retroactively tried it in the early noughties. So when Shaw's tried to return briefly to making movies and made Drunken Monkey, that's probably one of the last ones that we got. But then it kind of evolved into something else because like the Ip Man movies, Grandmaster, kind of like that weird sort of throwback, but with much more modern sort of sensibilities when it came to the filmmaking aspect of it. They'd kind of lost that kind of like fly by the seat of their pants. We've got half an hour left of light and we've got to get 20 more shots. Let's just fucking go for it kind of vibe. So hard to say. I don't know how to
when I look. I have a list here. Excuse me. And on Shaw Brothers, I mean, the 84 is a lot to read through, but it seems like the ends is Secret Service of the Imperial Court, 84.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supreme Swordsman, and then Wits of the Brats. And then when it goes to 85, it's Journey of the Doomed, The Young Vagabond, and then Martial Arts of Shaolin in 86. It doesn't seem like so. I think that's like the tail end of Shaw Brothers, at least.
Yeah.
Because 85, it seems to only have one. Oh, there we have a cat coming into frame for our listeners.
We do. Yes.
But Dragon, what under your, does this like rank high for you? It doesn't
pretty high. I mean, it's weird. I kind of always have a tendency to kind of keep Shaw's off in its own sort of little thing, so I never really find myself comparing it or rating it against
agreed
kind of Shaw's movies. So it's got a sort of special place in my heart in the same area where I keep like Mystery of Chess Boxing or 7 Grandmasters. It kind of has that.
Absolutely.
It kind of lives in that world, and it's definitely within my top 5 amongst that little world of kind of non-Shaw's kind of just classic era awesome good time martial arts movies. So I wouldn't want to kind of give it an exact placement number, but it's kind of way up there for me, and probably above Mystery of Chess Boxing. I really love Mystery of Chess Boxing. I think all in all, it's a kind of slightly more better rounded movie, but I think I need to rewatch The Hot, the Cool, and the Vicious, and I don't think I'm giving out any spoilers when I say that Michael Wirth has got a nice version of The Hot, the Cool, and the Vicious coming at some time soon, and they've been going back and forth and doing loads more stuff for the next Bruceploitation box
Oh,
sets. I
yeah.
know they've probably
So
revisited
stoked.
with Lee Tso Nam again, so I suspect there'll be some overlap, right? You'll probably be getting some extra kind of content for the Hot, Cool, and Vicious release. So yeah, that can't come soon enough for me. It's kind of one that I'm really, really going to look forward to revisiting with all the bells and whistles of the extras that we maybe won't ever see for Shaolin versus Lama, but we can get for the Hot, Cool, Vicious.
If only.
I want the Unbeaten 28. I've been hoping for a Joshua Quo second box set from Eureka. Because there's that period there we're talking about. I mean, Unbeaten 28's 1980, and I have a ton of nostalgia for that one. Mang Fei, I think he's great. And that one, there's just something about those. I'm assuming, because when Michael Worth talks about going back, he's going to those film archives, and it's just shocking the state of these movies, and Shaw Brothers, believe it or not, wasn't like when they went to get those were pretty. I don't know if you've seen the pictures. Those weren't in some climate controlled thing. Yeah. I mean, it looked like some dude's basement almost.
Absolutely.
So they had their work cut out for them. And I do like, it's funny, like you watch Shaw Brothers for a while and you get into that Shaw Brothers universe. And when you jump to this indie Joseph Quo vibe, it scratches a different itch. And maybe it's the unpredictable nature of it. You don't know what's going to come. I mean, they throw in very odd things sometimes. It's kind of like you get whiplash from it. And I appreciate in Shaw Brothers movies, they get out of the set and you feel some of that aspect come into that. You know what I mean? I think what it is that, Joseph, I can't always, like, Joseph Quo has his own style. Lee Tso Nam has their own style, but for the indies, they really cover a lot of ground with that, World of Drunken Master and Mystery of Chess Boxing, all of that. It feels like it fits nicely with Lee Tso Nam. It's kind of like this other, like you said, Dragon, like another realm. And I think I think it's a no-brainer. We're going to have to do Mystery of Chess Boxing on here at some point.
Absolutely.
We've got so many indies to do. I think films like the people love but don't talk about on podcasts much, like Born Invincible. I've never seen a podcast about. I called it Porn Invincible. Well done. That's great. Freudian slip there. But I don't think I've seen a podcast about Born Invincible. So
nor Porn Invincible with Carter Dawn.
No, I will track that down next.
Porn of it. Yeah, it's interesting. The indies, I mean, I really enjoy them, and it's like them going to Taiwan and all that. I'd love to see some more behind. Hopefully, like you said, with Michael going there, I'd love to see more of that. It's funny. You take for granted. You watch these movies, you relax, and it's enjoyable. It's just pure joy, like Fu said. But when you get some of that behind the scenes stuff. It's Lee Tso Nam said his first movies, he wanted to quit every single movie. And his studio head was saying to him, "No, listen, if you quit, they're going to blame it on you and you're going to get fired. But if you make it and it's bad, they'll just blame it on the box office and you can keep going." So he had to keep going. It's just like, you got to give credit to these guys out there, what they were going through. I can't even imagine, and it's a shame. I wish there was more, like, really, like that little clip of the Mic'd Avengers behind the scenes. I'd love to see, like, just a real hour-long making of,
It's unbelievable that clip even exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just comes down to the fact, I think it was sadly disposable because these movies, the DVD, VHS didn't exist, and they would just go out. The prints would be shared around, they get destroyed and stuff. And, once I think VHS came in, and even maybe, I think like there were some home reel to reel stuff. I think that was more like lesser, like it wasn't as, Betamax came in. I think once that came in, the preservation, that's when people start saying, "Hey, let's not throw out this 7 reels of Bruce Lee behind the scenes."
Right. Have you seen the behind the scenes of 8 Diagram Pole Fighter?
Is it on the Arrow release or is it on YouTube or? Okay.
I saw it on YouTube. And,
I'll have to check it out.
But it's super long. It's like 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long.
The one,
I need that.
Fu, is that the one where you see like along arriving in his Rolls Royce at the beginning of the day, and then kind of getting in and going in and sort of like working their way through, kind of getting extras into costume and stuff, and then you see him directing Gordon Liu sweating buckets under the amount of light that's in there.
It's so magical though, just to see it. Oh,
it's really cool, man.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Lau Kar-Lung, he reminds me, I don't know why, if you're working in a restaurant, he reminds me of like the boss, like you'd be nervous around, like if you're making stuff. I don't know why, even though he does seem friendly sometimes. Like Chang Che, I feel like would have your back. I mean, I could be off on this. But something about Lau Kar-Lung, like when I feel like if I was working in him, I'd feel like intimidated versus Chang Che or Lee Tso Nam.
I think that's pretty accurate. I think a lot of I don't think Chang Che was the guy on set saying, now we got to do it again, we can make it better. I think Chang Che would be the guy be like, right, cool, we've got it, moving on. Where I think the Venoms themselves were probably the ones that were like, nah, give me one more go, I think I can do it better. Whereas
and they would go off and film on their own too.
Yeah, with Lau Ga-Long, you were not moving on.
I always love the story about Sammo Hung, where back in the day, all the stuntmen would basically meet up at this one like cafe or restaurant and wait for the phone to ring at the restaurant to see who wants work that day, you know?
Oh, cool.
So they'd all be at this restaurant, and whenever Sammo Hung called, no one wanted the work. Because they're just like, oh, he's going to put us through absolute hell. I don't want to do it. But of course, you have to work. So a bunch did do it. But yeah, it's on that the Stuntmen documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, that story. I can't even remember who tells it. It might even be Mars that told the story where just no stunt people were just like, don't, it's Sammo, like, no. But yeah, it's great.
It'd be like going with Kubrick, like on Eyes Wide Shut. I can't remember which guy it was. An actor like quit because he wanted to do 84 takes. I think was it Harvey Keitel, or I can't remember who it was. Someone was in the movie and left because he made him walk through a door like 80 times. He's like, how can this be different than the other one, you know? And that's cool to have that mad scientist. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We get to sit with this beautiful Blu-ray and popcorn and be like, and these people are out there like, wow, you know,
going through hell for our benefit. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, cool, guys. We're coming around to hour 15 here. It was awesome chatting with you guys on this one.
Yeah, it's always interesting to discuss a film like this, I think, especially with fans of the genre, because a lot of people would say, you know, this is just a standard revenge flick kung fu film. It's cheesy, it's silly. But once you sit down and start kind of kicking around ideas and more about the film, and there's tidbits to be, it's just such a joy, because I don't think this film's regularly discussed because a lot of people don't find stuff to talk about. Not that I'm not trying to be pompous and say, well, we did, but I just think it kind of falls in that category of cheesy kung fu film, and people don't talk about it enough. But there is stuff to kind of explore in these films. So this was super nice. I haven't had a chance to talk about a film like this, so it's awesome.
For sure. Have you heard any rumblings, Dragon, or anyone of a restoration of this?
Sadly, no. The version that Shaun shared with us, which was entirely fan, kind of same, I think, upscaled. And
upscaled, it's choppy at times. He has to fill in the frame rate, it seemed, or he had to lower the frame. It's not perfect, but it's enough.
It's nice though.
I can imagine it being really. I don't want to kind of spin us back into another big rabbit hole here, but particularly in the way that Lee Tso Nam cut action, where he was unafraid of like punching in cuts in a place where you probably really shouldn't like put in a cut, where it's really like right in the middle of a move, or right, it's stuff where it's really difficult to try and match cuts. You kind of see the seams a lot more, which I think is part of its charm, because it never really diminishes it. You never feel like it's lessening the quality of it. But I can imagine that would make it an absolute hellish nightmare to try and do a restoration, unless you could get the original camera negative, and God knows if that's like possible. So I really don't know. I think in the case of the Hot, Cool, and the Vicious, I think they found a really good kind of print, but not a camera negative print, like a print that would have gone around cinema.
Oh, okay.
Interpositive or
yeah.
Oh no, you mean just like a straight print? Because I guess there's the negative intra or internegative, interpositive, and then there's like the prints that go around.
Yeah.
And those tend to have the way more the flicker, of course, and all that. But do you think they found a theater print more? Is that what they
for
found?
Hot, Cool, and the Vicious? I think
yeah.
So. Yeah.
Okay.
I've not heard any rumblings, and I don't know if Dan Halstead's ever spoken. But I think, has this ever been screened at the New Beverly? Have they ever screened Shaolin versus Lama?
I don't think so. They did. I went to the Lee Tso Nam night, and it was. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a triple header, which I had trouble with. Like, as you get older too, I mean, maybe I was 19, like it's hard to do 2 full movies, but 3, oh my gosh, you know, it's like, it's like carving out 6 hours. But it was Fist of Fury 2, I think it was Exit the Dragon, Enter the Tiger, and then it was Hot, Cool, and the Vicious. And I did the 2 exploitations. I didn't make it to the 3rd one. I think Michael was at that. This is right before I listened to the podcast. And he did. I don't think he got that one. I know Tarantino has like a To Die For 35 millimeter thing.
Yeah.
And he's really strict with this theater. He doesn't even have a digital projector. It says on it, all on film, all 35 millimeter. Maybe he'd do a 16 millimeter or something like that. Because there's a Hollywood theater in Pittsburgh. Well, they have a 70 millimeter they're bringing in. It's, and so they'll do that 35 millimeter, and they'll do like a couple digital films, but he's so like purist on it that it's all on, and it's cool. You go there and it shows cartoons at the beginning. It's such an experience. And like, and on Christmas, because it's in LA, like they did Pulp Fiction one time, and John Travolta came down, was like dancing outside, and they do Hateful Eight on Christmas a lot. And Quentin came down, would sit with his girlfriend at the time in the theater, and he'll do a Q&A in the front. That's the cool thing. They always do a Q&A before the movie. So when I just moved to LA, I saw the ad mat and it said Shaw Timber. My jaw dropped. I went down. It was Dan Housted from Hollywood Theater in Oregon. He talks to the crowd. He tells the story of bringing in all these movies from a Shaw studio that was abandoned that Mona Fong didn't get to. And I'm sure you've heard this story. And so it was like a Indiana Jones. They had to rip up the flooring, and it was underneath a stage. So there's a theater in the wood. It was all under there. And bringing back Mack trucks of it, they saw Dirty Ho, and they confiscated it at the border because they thought it was like porn. And so he's telling this story, and the place was laughing. And I will say, so he said 8 Diagram Pole Fighter. I talked to him afterwards. He was so nice. And he said 8 Diagram Pole Fighter is his favorite Kung Fu movie. His 36 Chamber, I think, which we watched first, was really, really beat up. I mean, it was like, I'm talking like, when it's like they have to change the reels up there. Yeah. And which is funny, at the Fist of Fury 2, Michael Worth mentions on the podcast, the guy messed it up. The audience didn't notice. He put a full reel before another reel of the movie, but the audience didn't really even catch it, And but the end of reels, it gets really, really, really bad as it gets towards the end, and it feels like it's going to disintegrate, and then it gets nice and clear. But no, they didn't do they didn't do Shaolin vs. Lama, I can remember, but they did it. Something about seeing these movies on the big screen, it blows you away. You see everything in a new light,
Yeah, one day I hope to see an old school film on the big screen. I never have.
I was just checking there to see, because RZA did do, at some point, he did an event with Shaolin vs. Lama through the 36 Cinema website. Yeah, where he did like kind of his live commentary and stuff for it. I didn't know which version of the movie that they'd showed around that, but I don't even know if that site's still up.
Yeah, that version, I actually have that version. I can't seem to find it. I used to have it, the one with the RZA commentary, and it's a good looking version, but the frame rate drops in a lot of the scenes, so it looks a bit choppy in some of the fight scenes. So now I don't know whether that was the stream or someone ripping it. Perhaps there was a problem there. I'm not sure. Also, RZA's commentary is very sparse in that film. Okay. He talks like every, 10 minutes. He doesn't.
But that makes sense now, because if it's a live commentary, you wouldn't want the guy talking the whole time. So he's sitting there with the audience, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it was the best rip that we had at the time, and until this fan made one came out recently, and
maybe Sloppy Seconds will come out with some weird.
Maybe, or we might see, hopefully, I think what we saw with Mystery of Chess Boxing, where they might basically kind of get a version that's not quite good enough for its own standalone release, but bundle it on with something. And I wonder if, you're in touch with Michael more than I think either of us are, but that would be something that would be super cool for the release of The Hot, Cool, and the Vicious. So if we got like Shaolin versus Lama, just as in whatever state it's in, just on that same Blu-ray disc with the nice restored version of Hot, the Cool, and the Vicious,
for sure,
that'd be badass. Because then we could get a commentary from Michael, and I think Michael's probably the man who's. Michael and Frank Zhang have been the two that have been most regularly in contact with Lee Tso Nam in the last couple of years. So if anyone's going to give us some nuggets of wisdom about the film, I think I would hope that it could be one of those two guys.
Fingers crossed.
Do you agree, though, that I feel when I watch that I keep saying Mystery Science Theater, when I watch Mystery of Chess Boxing, I feel it looks great. I don't feel they should have. I think they should have done a standalone. I think they dropped the ball on that. You know what I mean?
I'm right there with you. I think it was just by the fact that I had burnt in subs. There's something about
that's great though. That's part of the culture. That's part of the that's part of the experience.
It's never fazed me too, but I think it kind of oh God, I won't fall into my Eureka rant, right? Don't worry, stay easy, Jason. I won't offend anybody. But yeah, Eureka, I think, are very much like to think of themselves as the UK criterion, and I'm sure they felt that didn't quite meet their lofty standards.
Fair enough.
But it's still a great release. We should say it for anyone who's not picked it up. It was available as a limited extra on Swordsman of All Swordsmen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You got it kind of as a bonus on that release, which was a great release. But yeah, I too would have liked to see it as a standalone.
Yeah.
What do you guys we'll get going, but what do you guys think will be the next? I think they should do a 4K scan of five Venoms if they want to. I mean, that would be major. I mean, a lot of the people that say 5 Venoms, 5 Deadly Venoms, they might not buy Shawscope 1. I think they should, but if they had a standalone 4K of 5 Deadly Venoms, I think that would break the bank. That would sell.
I think we'll see more of that. I think with people, especially with 88 Films putting every Jackie Chan film on 4K at the moment, I think we'll see more companies shifting their kind of old school films into 4K. Did they announce yesterday? Was I correct? I think I saw this that Hard Boiled and City on Fire from Shout are going to be 4K.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
coming digital first.
Digital first, but then following up with 4K releases. Yeah, it's going to be presumably the first ones out of the gate. And in terms of Shaw's on 4K, Hammer Horror, Hammer have started doing pretty good special editions of their releases here in the UK. And Hammer did a couple of collaborations with Shaw's, and so they're releasing. They call him Mr. Shatter, aka Shatter.
Yeah,
is coming out as a 4K.
That looks cool.
Looks great. It's a pretty good film. It's got another grimy exploitation and a production that was riddled with problems. So I'm really pretty excited to kind of hear what there's apparently an awful lot of like what could have been there. They've gone back into Hammer's archives and found different alternate scripts, and I suppose they're going to explore all of that in the release. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time until we see
more Shaws.
4K.
Time to be alive. Not to go on too much, but the imprint release announcements recently. Whew,
yeah,
that's a sexy little release there. Both of those. So
I need to get in on that. Dragon though, is the Shout is the 4K of Hard Boiled a true no asterisks true 4K scan of the negative or print?
Don't know.
Okay. Because every time they got close, it's always like, oh, but it's this, it never could quite get there. The versions that were getting closer and closer are Hard Boiled in those movies.
Yeah.
I think so, because I mean it's had really kind of decent releases. I mean, part of the reason why the Hong Kong Rescue versions look so good is they were able to take the best available versions, which came in territories that just weren't allowed to have English dubs or English subs on them. So that like Japan and Asia both had pretty regular releases of the movies in continually bettering quality. I think Japan at the time when that Hong Kong Rescue release came out was the best looking version, and that's the one that he kind of used as his sort of baseline for it. So I'm assuming that now that they've basically got the rights, they'll have taken the keys to the kingdom, so they'll have whatever negatives or whatever existing restoration that's already been done completely under their control now, so able to do whatever they want with it. So yeah, from what I understand, it's going to be a new restoration, but from what I do not know.
Okay.
But I think a true 4K restoration, it's not going to be an upscale.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right, fellas. Well, any parting thoughts?
I think most people that have listened to this episode have probably seen Shaolin versus Lama. But if you haven't, give it a go. Give it a go. And if you can I shouldn't say if you can track down, there's actually a subtitled version on YouTube. If you want to watch it that way, by all means, but give the old full screen dub a chance.
Yes.
Because it's
a lot of magic there.
A lot of magic, exactly.
Yeah. And there's a dubbed widescreen version on YouTube as well. Like Wu-Tang Collection have got both. They've got like a pan and scanned version, and they've got a widescreen version, which both have that classic English dub, and you can revel in hearing the many samples that have been lifted from it. But yeah, it's a good time.
Wonderful.
And I wanted to say thanks to all the listeners that have been listening. We really appreciate the support on the podcast so far, and we love everyone checking it out, and we got lots more to come.
Oh, before we go, I have to say, since we haven't addressed it, R.I.P. Richard Norton.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's
so sad, shocking.
He sadly passed. I don't know if it was today or I don't know exactly when it was, but absolute legend in the genre. Millionaire's Express, Magic Crystal, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Lucky Stars, sorry. Just an absolute legend, and it's really sad to see him go. Apparently, he was still working throughout Hollywood.
Completely.
He worked on Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah, and Furious.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad, he was doing like loads and loads of behind the scenes stuff, so training an awful lot of people up.
Yeah.
Sometimes on camera, if you look closely in Mad Max Fury Road, you can see him in full makeup as a performer there.
Absolutely.
Still looks amazing. And I think this wasn't something that was expected. I think he died very, very unexpected. He was just 75, which is way too young to go for someone that's looked after himself that well.
Yeah.
Because phenomenal shape his entire life. But yeah, that one hit pretty hard. He was from every account I've heard. I never kind of our paths never crossed personally, but I know an awful lot of people who did, and certainly Mike Fury, who's someone that I do speak to quite a bit. I'd interviewed him quite a lot, and I think he's a big part in Mike's first book, The Art of Action. And everybody who's ever crossed past them had nothing but good things.
Lovely
to say.
guy, apparently. Yeah, an absolute joy. So yeah,
I didn't realize he did jujitsu when I looked at his profile, his Facebook profile. He goes to John Jacques Machado School, and when I first moved to LA, I went there, and the price was just astronomical per. He's the one that gave Joe Rogan his black belt, Eddie Bravo, and tons of people. He's amazing if you ever look him up. But it was really, really pricey, like upwards of $300 a month. It was really 240 maybe. But I wanted to go there, but then I went to 10th Planet, which was awesome. But it was interesting to see. I think either his cover photo was a jiu-jitsu thing and has him. So he seems really like he did a lot of different martial arts.
Yeah.
In different styles.
Yeah, legend.
But that's sad. All right, fellas. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See you next month.
Absolutely.